ekiwamba abantu mu ggwanga lya Uganda, ekitta abantu, ekitulugunya abantu, ekibuzaawo abantu, ekisiba abantu obwemage abatalina musango. General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, mutabani we Muhoozi n'abalala obudde bwabadduugaliridde dda. Anti omusango President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine gwe yateeka mu ICC obujulizi n'abayawudde 2015 era ne bukkirizibwa kaakati nno Kajjampuni yabalagadde dda mu bbwa. Abakulembeze ba National Platform okuva mu diaspora ekintu bakitaddemu ate amaanyi amajja era General Museveni gakaba gakomba kubanga eyamwalula yasiridde dda. Aso tulaba akatambi kano naawe ogenda kutegeera ebigambo.
Comrades back in Uganda. And I'm also excited to introduce that we have 7 chapters here in Europe. We have Austria, Switzerland, Denmark, the Netherlands. We have Germany, France, and Sweden, where I'm residing. And each of these chapters are charged with a mission to lobby for transition and democracy in our country, Uganda. So it's pretty very straightforward. So we're here to discuss the missing or the abducted comrades back in Uganda. Thanks. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, our panelists, for those introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, this program aims to speak to the EU, in particular, the institutions of the EU, that is the EU Commission, the EU Parliament, and the EU Council. But not only that, we also intend to speak to other agencies, within the framework of the EU. We intend to speak to the different governments within the EU bloc. We also intend to speak to the different embassies. But above all, we really want to speak to the citizenry within the EU. This is the conversation that we're initiating today. And this is the conversation that is going to we're going to roll out. It is going to be periodic. It is going to be thematic. Right now, we are talking about human rights, but later on, we shall be talking about matters around rule of law, around corruption, around governance, in particular governance transgressions that are happening in Uganda. So a lot more is expected. But right now, we really want to interrogate this EU-Uganda relations, which is very interesting, which is very, very important, but which is also very complex. The EU as a partner is very, very important. Is one of the biggest contributors in terms of the aid development that they give to Uganda. As of 2021 report, EU contributed 896 million euros towards our development budget. This is really, really a lot of money, which means that the EU also can, because it is such an important partner, it means it can leverage, it can exert diplomatic pressure, as well as impose targeted sanctions. For example, the Magnitsky Act. It can invoke the Magnitsky Act to impose these sanctions. So, ladies and gentlemen, why is the EU important? We really think that the EU ought to do more in upholding. First of all, the EU upholds democratic principles and values. It is also upholds rule of law. So we'd expect that it holds Uganda accountable. So what is happening in Uganda, in particular, the violation of human rights, calls for the EU really to hold Uganda accountable. And here is why. The EU is a signatory to a number of treaties, international conventions, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights, as well as the International Covenant on cultural, social, and economic rights. And finally, it is a signatory to the UN, to the United Nations guidelines on on human rights and business. So in other words, before doing business with any country, it should interrogate the human rights records. And clearly, Uganda would not qualify to be doing business with the EU. We are therefore calling upon the EU to exercise its international obligations and hold Uganda accountable. Before it can do any business, it must do a human rights audit or a human rights impact assessment before it can do any business with Uganda. So we are holding the EU accountable for the continued operation, of Ugandans, for the continued support of the dictator. What does this do? It does three things. It legitimizes the dictator. It just perpetuates our suffering, but it also undermines our efforts to liberate ourselves. But above all, it emboldens Museveni. And I really think those of you who are up to date with what is happening right now, Uganda is sleepwalking into a coup. Museveni is soon going to impose his son, to crown his son. This is what we'd not like, and the EU can stop this. Ladies and gentlemen, Uganda as a country has so many problems. Really, we could say we're at crossroads. Uganda has so many problems, beginning with governance issues or governance transgressions. We have gross human rights violations. We have what is termed as labor externalization, but as a matter of fact, this has morphed into human trafficking. So the project that started that was supposed to create job opportunities of taking young Ugandans to the Middle East has effectively turned into an active human trafficking activity. And we must try to stop this. We have a refugee crisis, partly caused by Museveni's militaristic and expansionist policies across the greater region. We've made incursions in DRC, we've made incursions in South Sudan, and all the neighboring areas, causing a big influx of refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a silent genocide that is going on in the country, and this needs to be addressed. This is around the central region. This is also happening in northern Uganda, West Nile, in Karamoja region, very, very serious. But this information does not filter through because the dictator controls, has a firm grip on the media, on the flow of information. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, we have serious land grabbing that is going on, serious displacements, particularly in the areas of Uganda and the north. People are being displaced from their land. We have cultural sites, some of which are actually protected by the UN as cultural heritage sites. These are being destroyed, and being destroyed deliberately to undermine the identity of certain ethnic groups, in particular the Waganda people, the Waganda ethnic group. Ladies and gentlemen, we have corruption on, call it runaway corruption. The recent report shows that Uganda annually loses money to the tune of 11 trillion Ugandan shillings, translated into if this is translated into or converted into dollars, we're talking about 2.9 billion US dollars. Now, this is money that could actually, this is money that is being taken away from different projects. And those of you who are up to date with what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware of the recent scandal. It is ongoing. That is, it is unraveling. The speaker has been, engaging, not just the speaker, but the institution of parliament has been having a field day. They've been stealing trillions and trillions of Ugandan shillings, and there is absolutely no accountability. And as a matter of fact, Dictator Museveni yesterday met among and kind of he made a statement in effect that was protecting the criminals. So, ladies and gentlemen, the list is long. However, what we really want to focus on is the human rights violations. And our focus is going to be on the abducted 18. This is a group of Ugandans who were abducted under different circumstances from places of work, from their residences, from homes, even on the street. These people have been, the circumstances under which they were abducted were very violent. Some were caught on camera. Others just, disappeared. So this is a narrative that is painful, that is traumatic on the psyche of Ugandans, and this is something that we want to address in today's broadcast. Comrade Robert, please, can you shed more light on the 18 and give us some details about these victims who have disappeared, whose fate we do not know? Thank you.
I think we're better off just mentioning the gentlemen we're missing. I think it goes without saying that one or a couple of major figures which were abducted are none other than John Bosco Chibalama and then Johnny Dabonela. I think for those who are following the victims or the abducted comrades, the Prime Minister came on the Parliament floor and pretty much, not probably on the Parliament floor, on the media, out in the media, testifying that they had John Bosco Chibalama in custody. So we're still wondering why, up to now, after highlighting or acknowledging that they have John Bosco Chibalama, why the parents or Ugandans as citizens have not cast an eye to this gentleman who's been missing for quite some time. So same with the 18. So over the course of the program in our episodes, we're going to be unpacking each and every 18 abducted victims, when they were abducted, inviting the victims or the families concerned, their story, what they're going through. We'll even go further by inviting cases abroad of abducted cases. A couple of which come in mind. In Sweden, there were a couple of guys who were abducted in somewhere in Ethiopia. The French government has had his ordeal. The Swiss government has had an ordeal of those of their citizens being abducted abroad. So we're going to be unpacking each and every of these cases, potentially inviting them to tell us their ordeal. What was it like to be abducted down in the Amazonas, down in Mali, down in Ethiopia, down anywhere in the world? And what were their families? How were the families getting through this period when their loved ones were missing? So these are the things we're going to be unpacking over a period of 6 to 12 months. So this is not going to be an one-off program. We're going to be deep diving into the gross human rights violations in Uganda. And let me really emphasize why this is really key and an important thing for us to do. For those who are Ugandans and for those who know the history of our country, post-independence, we had a key figure. The first Prime Minister of Uganda, John Benedicto Chiwanaka, was abducted around the early 70s. His families up to now have never cast an eye on him. So Fast forward, when we really put these 18 people who are missing in perspective, we don't want to repeat, to have a Benedicto scenario where 50 years from now, the families, the relatives, and we Ugandans will look back and question, what did we do? Why didn't we put pressure to the government, to our development partners in the EU who are doing business with our government, of where our loved ones and our comrades are? So this is a concerted effort for us to really pressure the government of Uganda to produce these 18 people. So if they were thinking they were going to intimidate and create fear for everyone coming up to raise and question the whereabouts of these people, I think they were misinformed. Us in the EU, we're going to hammer and we're going to demand that every developing partner doing business with our country really demands and puts the government of Uganda on the wall to produce these victims. So that's pretty much what I can say for now. But for the rest of the victims, we'll be unpacking them periodically, episode by episode. Thanks. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Comrade Robert, for that submission. Very touching. It is about the trauma. It's about the suffering. It's about the misery. Not just, of course, it's not just about the disappeared individuals, but it's about the families. It's about the communities. It's about the nation. And human rights are universal rights. So this is not just a matter for Ugandans, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we're speaking out to the powers that be, that they must do the right thing. And do the right thing and stop these abductions, these killings. Yes, just briefly, please, Robert, as a follow-up, just tell us really, how did you join the struggle and why are you in the struggle? What is your story, Robert?
Interesting and good question. It's really very, I mean, it's very, very interesting for me. I mean, to sit here being active and being an activist for change and for change for our country. I mean, I think most of us, especially we who live in Europe or the diaspora, have been, and a few of our comrades back home, even here in Europe, are complacent. We live in our comfort zones. We feel that everything which goes out and on in our country doesn't really bother us as long as we're really safe with our loved ones. So that's how I felt for some time being here in Europe. But a time really which comes to mind vividly is when prior to the pandemic, I think our leader, Bobi Wine, was going to perform. I think it was his last gig or trip to Europe before the 2021 general elections. So it dawned to me here in Sweden that there was a group of NRM regime apologists who are intending to harm him for reasons known to themselves. And I was not following politics back then. I was just comfortable, as I said, like everyone else. And being a resident here, I got concerned. I got interested in why would someone harm someone who is coming here to perform? And it's because I was ignorant. I was not knowing what was going on in the country. So, but since I was here, we're not going to allow that to happen. Fast forward, he never made it to Sweden because the pandemic came down. So the concert never took part. So what that triggered is my interest to know what he stands for as a leader and where he drives his charisma and resilience and the need for the change in our country. So I've been following I started following his his trips, his speeches on different occasions, which were very inspiring. And this is a guy who I used to see on his concerts. He's come to Sweden a few times. A friend of mine used to host him here in Sweden, so it was not new to me. But it was nice to see his transition from being a musician to a politician. And unless truth be told, I think it's the biggest powerhouse of the 21st century politicians. I mean, that credit you have to give him. So, yeah, and the rest is history. So that's how I came to know him. And the next thing I know, last year, he appointed me to lead the new diaspora committee here, which accepted the honorably. So that's my story, being part of this movement of change in Uganda. Thanks.
Thank you, Comrade Robert. Yes, Comrade Mugisha, what is your story as far as the struggle is concerned? What motivated you to join the struggle? If you could give us your story, please. Thank you. Oh, Comrade, you're muted. Please unmute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I've told you before, by names of Mugisha, and the vice chairperson of in Europe. For me, what inspired me specifically to join the struggle, it's a very simple and margin thing, because I joined active politics way back in 2015. So my eyes were on the ball and my eyes were on politics. I could see how things were going on. I worked with the electoral commission somewhere in Nasana. So I was watching everything. But what mostly inspired me to tackle in and, come into this struggle are the great words of our principal, the great words of our president, that whenever he came up to speak about something, he would be realistic. And as a young person who is motivated to see the change in my country, to see that young people have better lives, to see that there is a good country with good governance, I believed in him, and I believe that this is the time that Uganda should be liberated from the gallows of people who think that they are above all, and also prepare the country to be delivered from the cries and from the yearning of the people of Uganda. So this inspired me to join the struggle. And within 2017, here I joined the People Power Movement before it became the National Unity Platform. Served in different categories in the Middle East with Madam Patricia Mugisha. Went on to come back to Kampala in the election time, doing the grassroots work up to now, because our president, his stance on changing the country has never changed. And since it has never changed, it keeps inspiring me to remain in this struggle, to remain in this thing of liberating my country.
Thank you, Comrade Mugisha, for that. Yes, Comrade, is hearing all the narratives about the violence, about the abductions, the tortures that we've not mentioned, the killings. Really, what comes to one's mind, of course, is just the amount of trauma and mental health that must be prevalent in the community. How did these traumatic experiences impact the mental health and well-being of the individuals who are abducted, as well as their families and communities?
Thank you very much, Joe. Are you able to hear me?
I hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, as described by the previous speakers, it's of course very evident that these situations cause impact on individuals and families and communities and the nation. I mean, sometimes when people are faced with uncertainty, they don't know how to behave, what to expect, and this causes a lot of anxiety. Therefore, that being traumatic, it affects everyone. It affects not just the individuals, but everyone, but particularly to the individuals. It causes long-term traumatic effects, which if a person is not supported, if a person is not treated, they may go down the drain. Like they may not be able to function as expected. And yet we live in a fast-paced world where we have no time to lag behind. So these things affect the individuals who are directly involved because of the way they are conducted, but also these abductions affect families and they create dynamics, and we may not even understand the true stories of these persons. We may not even be accorded the opportunity to grant appropriate support because talk about children. How is a 5-year-old going to describe how they feel about something they've heard, they've watched on TV? Remember, they also have their imaginary kind of minds. So everybody is affected differently, and we cannot use one size fit all for everyone. But certainly mental health is affected when it comes to abductions, when it comes to uncertainty, when it comes to unexplained events. Because when someone is abducted and they've disappeared, they are not dead. But imagine the feeling of families being at funerals that they have not experienced. That loss is bigger than the actual loss of, getting a body and burying it. And everybody deals differently. So it's dangerous and it's bad and it's sad. And my heart goes out to the families and individuals that are going through such situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Comrade, for that answer. Yes, yeah. So we move on. How have the abducted 18 persons impacted their families and communities? And what are the immediate and long-term consequences of their disappearances? Comrade Robert? Comrade Robert?
Yes, thanks again, Joe. I think the psychologist of my predecessor colleague who's been talking about the traumatic experience these people go in pretty summarizes well, but I'll give you my take on this. It's really, really, it could be subjective, and then it really varies from personality to personality. But let's dig it into the age groups we're talking about. I mean, it's one thing to be an adult as a mother, because most of these abducted guys, most abducted victims are guys. So the mothers have to fend with the families and the kids who are there. So probably the much as it's traumatic to a parent who is an adult, it is probably less impactful to the kids because they're kids and they don't know what, they don't have a clue. And most of these victims, for some reason, most of them had more young kids. A few had some older victims. So, and the time factor, really plays in. How? It's one thing to know that your loved one is abducted, and there's certainty as to when you're going to see them, and it's another when you're in a state of suspense whereby you don't know when. So it takes a toll in you as a victim who doesn't know the whereabouts of your victim? So the trauma can really be relative depending on which age group and how resilient and strong someone has as a psyche. So, and again, this also impacts the societies where these people are in, because people don't live in isolations; they live in society. This impacts on the people who are there. Trying to understand the dynamics of how these people are coping with these things. And I think this is very dangerous, because I think that's the fear and the intimidation General Museveni is really impacting on the societies, whereby they don't have to question the status quo. They shouldn't be asking. So, but put yourself in their picture. I mean, how would they? How do they really survive? That's the $1 million question. So, it really causes some sense of despair. We've had cases where the elderly, especially grandmothers and fathers, have collapsed and have passed away just out of despair, without knowing the whereabouts of their loved ones. So it's really traumatic, whether you're young or an adult. And for the kids, with time, as they get old, they start asking questions. That is an ongoing process, whereby the mother or the families have to communicate to these kids of the scenario around their missing dad. So that's pretty much a traumatic experience. Wish anyone to go through to what these people are going through. That's pretty much what I can add to our psychologist expert who spoke prior to myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Comrade Robert. And really, the ramifications of these violations are very, very wide. They go beyond the individual, they go beyond the family, they go beyond the community. And as a matter of fact, like I said, these are universal concerns. So they're universal rights, and so it is a very serious issue. That is why no nation should take it lightly. Whether it's the EU or any other development partner. Yes. Okay. Well, Comrade Gesher, what legal and institutional frameworks exist within Uganda to address human rights violations, and how effective have they been in ensuring accountability and justice? And I really think what has been lacking in most of these situations are accountability and justice. Thank you. Over to you, Comrade. Please unmute, Comrade. Comrade, unmute. Comrade Mugisha, please unmute your mic. Unmute your mic, please.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Robert, please mute your mic.
If possible, Comrade, can you mute your mic a bit? Because thank you. Yeah, I was with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. As you know, back in Uganda, it is a laughing stock to talk about the legal framework in Uganda. Really, it's really a global laughter thing, because if we talk about human rights violations and abductions and legal framework, you hear about the Madam Nagadia, who is the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, talking things that are baseless, talking things instead of going into a deep search of human rights and the claims of people being handled in a way that is not mature enough. this shows you that even the Human Rights Commission of Uganda doesn't have the power to do what it should do. And recently we heard about the UN Human Rights Watch. Its contract was not renewed. And this is known to be the international human rights watchdog internationally. The contract was not renewed on circumstances that were not clear. It means that human rights and legal frameworks, they are both on parallel sides with Uganda. And when we talk about the courts of law, at least I can laugh more about that, because we see our comrades, civilians being taken to the military courts. Which government can do such a thing when someone, the case is not even a military case, but we see people being taken into military courts and charged with cases that really are fabricated. Even a young kid can see that the cases are fabricated. Like my comrade Kitunzi is looking great in the ballet. He will be charged with acquisition of the military attire. How laughter this issue can be, And going forward on this thing, we know that the government of Uganda, the executive body, the president of Uganda have held in his hands the power. He has he rules over all the institutions. He appoints the judges. He issues verdicts even before the courts have sat. He can say release so and so, do this and this. It means that the executive body, it means that the government of Uganda, the president himself, controls each and everything that is running into the country. And moving forward, we could see what the reshuffles that happened yesterday, where a person who is, he has cases within the ICC that are under investigations, the issues of, the case, I think it was taken in 2023, May, regarding torture. These cases are in the ICC. The first time himself, but right now as we speak, he is the chief of defense forces, which means he controls the security of the country. He controls the army of the country. And we know that when we are in search of justice, you can't forego security, you can't forego the executive arm, the judiciary arm. And when we go to parliament, again, it is a laughing stock, my dear friends. It is a laughing stock whereby we have a parliament whereby to issue, to talk about something in the parliament, people have to first go to Chankwanzi and, they consult their Spamo leader. This means that there is no independence when we talk about the judicial, when we talk about the legal framework, because each and every person who comes out to speak about this human rights violation ends up incarcerated, ends up being mistreated, ends up in the gallows of the dictator, because that's what the dictator wants. There is no independence in any of the factors. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mugisha. And I think this is a very, very important point that really would like to speak to the powers that be, that would like to speak to the citizenry within the EU, because they might think, well, your government, there is a semblance of democracy. We have institutions, but these institutions are dead. These institutions are under capture. You're talking about the judiciary. We cannot expect justice because the judicial officers, first of all, they are partisan, they are cadres, and they are appointed on the basis of their loyalty to the party. So there is a blatant miscarriage of justice. We cannot expect justice. And talking about the perpetrators of these violations, there is absolute impunity. These people, they kill and they walk away scot-free. So it is some kind of mafia state, where they execute people and they get away, scot-free. So we cannot expect justice for the families. First, we do not expect justice for the individuals. We do not expect justice for the families of these people. Very, very concerning. And this is really what we want, our people within Europe to understand. that what Ugandans are going through. Yes, Comrade Edith, hearing all that, you know, where people are violated, they cannot get justice. Definitely, you cannot be normal. One needs some kind of coping mechanisms. So, how do people cope with the constant threat of abduction and disappearance? What psychological strategies can be used to manage fear and anxiety in such circumstances? Over to you, comrade.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. First, when people know what they do and they know how much it may or might affect them and other people around them, I know that information is very important to share. So especially for close people, because if say a man is married, it's important for that man to share this information with his spouse. No matter what the public says, if the spouse has particular information, it would help them with coping in the event that the man is abducted or the woman is abducted, okay? And also, they will know better how to explain to their children, because you see how information is managed back home, that people say anything. Everybody has their own opinion about everything. Some is factual, some is just, you know, hearsay. So it's important for someone to have the significant people to have information. So the person who is in the struggle, the person who is at risk, needs to know how to share their information, so that if they go missing, the persons that care most about them will know what to expect. They will be equipped. Think about how this brings about dynamics in families. We've all seen how these things go down. So if a person is doing such risky kind of work, or believe that they join some struggles, and in this event, the political struggles that they know very well the result could be, they need to organize themselves. We've seen how people count them dead, and not everybody wishes your family well, even family members. It's important to be organized in terms of people's resources. In case they go missing, how does the family continue to survive? We worry about adults, we don't worry about children. And sometimes we think that children don't actually understand these things. That's wrong. Every child, every person at their different stage processes things differently. So what are the support systems in place? Professionals may not be reached immediately, but who do you trust? Who do you talk to? Okay? Who are the people that you can anchor yourself into, that you know that this person is my confidant? If anything happens to me, they should be contacted. We need to put those kind of things into account, so that when things happen, we're not just all over the place. That helps a lot with consolidation of information and resources. But also, I think firstly, everybody should be aware of how important their mental health is. Mental well-being is very important. With or without such situations, everybody should have a firm foundation mentally, because these things affect us differently. These things affect communities differently, but the individual, the people who bounce back faster than others. Why? Because they have invested in their mental health and mental well-being. So it's not something that we get in the end. It's something we work towards. We don't just arrive at it, we work towards it. So every day, build yourself in such a way that you are able to deal with whatever situation that comes. Anxiety, yes, will happen. Fear will be there. But if I know that this is what I'm fighting for, it doesn't matter how I go down, I will be sure that I was right and I did. And what is it that forces you? What is it that drives you? If you know what drives you, it does not matter how you go. You will know that deep down, you are for the right cause. So for the people that are determined like that, they will encourage their families to know that it is well with them. And such situations, if the family knows, if I'm aware that my husband has a good mind about what they're doing, has a good cause, I will be the first person to to support them. And if anything happens, I will be the first to advocate for them. But some people don't even know what their spouses or their friends, or, you know. So it's important to share information. It's important to anchor ourselves. It's important to have good support systems. It's important to seek professional advice, because certainly trauma will trigger certain physical situations. It brings about disease. It brings about irritations, anxiety, you know, all those things. So it's important to seek professional support. Am I talking to a doctor? If the doctor should be able to help me identify what is medical and what is not medical, and what is not medical, I will seek the support that I need to. Some people just talk to anybody and everybody. Some people feel too, they feel so strong, you know. I don't want to cause drama, but there is drama already. I'll give you an example. Where I'm at right now, I interact with refugees. Of course, everybody has their story, right? So there is this person who I recently ran into, and because of the traumatic situation, they got a heart condition. This heart condition was triggered by trauma, not that they actually had cardiac issues. So the man is deteriorating. His family is not aware. His immediate family is not aware. So I asked him, who have you talked to? I don't want to scare my wife. You don't want to scare your wife, but if you're taken back and you're dead, how is your wife going to forgive you? Yeah. So information is important, because then the first persons will know what to contain, and they will know how to support. Of course, it takes time, and everybody recovers differently, but it's important for everyone to know that their mental well-being is their priority. Thank you.
There was a bit of a malfunction. The mute button froze, so I was not able to unmute. So I apologize. Yes, I was saying that is very, very important information, because many of our people are really at a loss, and many times, like you said, people are caught completely unprepared, completely off guard. So I think those are very, very good tips. And ladies and gentlemen, those of us who are listening, these are tips that we can share with people, people in our community, people in our families. This information is needed, and knowing that, given the the level of deprivation, the level of poor services or social services, many people may not have access to professional help. So this information that we share here is very valuable. You can use it to share, with members of your community, members within your grassroots movements, particular foot soldiers. These very, very, very important coping mechanisms that you need to know about. Thank you. So moving on, yes. What role can international organizations such as the EU play in advocating for human rights in Uganda, particularly in cases involving abduction of individuals? Robert, please, if you may. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I think that's a very important question, and it really brings back to what recently happened in Uganda, the Uganda EU Business Forum, which was like, if you ask me, it was a slap in the face, because. And this comes back to the question you just you just mentioned. One would think a EU bloc as an institution would know better. You talked about in the intro about how they subscribe to different human rights treaties, regulations, and guidelines. Yeah, for those who don't know the EU, the founding values of the EU are around the sanctity of human rights. Yeah, that's what they were built on, protecting and promoting human rights is a big pillar for the EU as an institution. But the mere fact that they went ahead to do an EU-Uganda business forum, well knowing that the government of Uganda is committing gross human rights, is undespicable. One would think that it would be the advocate of human rights, and they would demand a question, and they will try to address these things prior to even doing that business forum, which they went away and did. So I guess that was a big statement. And as a Ugandan, I felt like we are powerless right now. What that meant is that they've legitimized the impunity and the violation of human rights by General Museveni. Yeah. On the other hand, you would think that they would have done better, because they're so strong and so powerful that if they had to step in and say, listen, before we do this business forum, what is it with these cases? Yeah, it may not go unnoticed. Let's not be fool ourselves. Let them not pretend that they don't see the demonstration on the streets of Europe, on the embassy of Europe, even in a very tough environment. They don't see the people who are being picked up on the streets of Uganda, those who really dare. They can't say that they don't see. So it's very unfortunate, and it feels that, in all honesty, Ugandan human rights or lives don't matter. That's the statement they sent when they did that Uganda business, EU business forum. We feel helpless, but we still go ahead and remind them, you should have done better. They need to speak Museveni, sense to Museveni, yeah, by demanding for him to provide the people, the 18 people who are abducted. So if you ask me what they should have done, that's what should have come at the forefront. I would probably have liked to have a Uganda EU post 21 general elections reconciliation forum. Yeah, I would have liked to have that kind of forum which addresses what happened at the recent general elections we had. And now you hear talk about the 2026 general elections. How do you reconcile going to a 2026 general elections when you can't even audit or account for the victims of the 2021 elections? That's sheer madness. It's really sheer madness. So again, to answer your question, they have the power, or they still have the power, to call the shots and demand that justice is served to the 18 abducted Ugandans. So we can put a closure on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. A very, very important question, particularly in terms of international relations, ladies and gentlemen. The EU, by virtue of its position as one of the most important partners, who is contributing 896 million euros to our development budget, they have leverage to influence, to exert diplomatic pressure, and actually put some demands And because the Uganda has been violating human rights, they're in position actually to impose targeted sanctions. They're in position to invoke the Magnitsky Act type of sanctions, but they've chosen not to do that. We know that they can use their power even to enforce, for example, to ensure that if there are any agreements, those agreements have human rights clauses in the treaties that are made, you know. So in other words, Uganda must meet certain minimum standards for it to trade with EU companies. But what have they done? They've given Uganda a blank check. Ladies and gentlemen, in some schools of thought, there's something called, they're talking about social and racial injustice. And this is what it is. Are they doing that because we are not Ukraine? Because we are Ugandans? Because we're Africans? Ugandan lives matter. Even a single life really matters. It counts. And we are calling out the EU to take us on their very, very values, where they talk of sanctity of life. A life lost is a life that must be fought for, and therefore must demand justice and accountability, so that the perpetrators who do these things must be held accountable. Yeah, but that is a very good point, and we really, again, the conversation goes on as we engage. Comrade Mugisha, how can civil society organizations and grassroots movements contribute to promoting and protecting human rights in Uganda? And what support can they receive from international partners like the EU?
I thank you very much for the opportunity offered.
Awo tuli okulabanga tutereeza Uganda yaffe, eggwanga lyaffe, ku lw'abaana baffe, ku lw'abazzukulu baffe, balina okubawa ebikolebwa. Ebikolebwa tulina okubyenyigiramu, tulina okuba ffe ffennyini nga tuli wakati mu nsonga zino, okulwana olutalo luno, okulaba nga eggwanga lyaffe tulitereeza ng'okwogewako nakyemalira, okulaba nga tukomya ekitta abantu, ekiwamba abantu, ekitulugunya abantu, ekibuzaawo bantu, n'okubonaabona Bannayuganda kwe tulimu mu nsi yaffe. Kyekijja okutuyamba ekyo okuzimba eggwanga eryeyagaza, erineebeeramu, erineewangaliramu abaana baffe nno n'oli wali ne wali, erineegombesa abantu abalala okujja okusobola okubeera mu Uganda nga nsi wamma ddala nnungi, nga si yawa nakyemalira. Ekifa kino tulwana olutalo olwo tulina odwerwanira ffe ffennyini, twalagenda dutulwanira kuba abazungu abo betwesigulira nabo munnaye bakola webafunira we bayingira, batafuna tebayingirawo bwe buzibu bwabwe. Kati tulina okwerwanira olutalo lwaffe nga ffe tusobola okutereeza eggwanga lyaffe. Bekyo tulaba ekigenda mu maaso nga tungana naffe tukyako pressure nga tunyiga kati omusango guli mu kkooti y'ensi yonna ICC, tulina naffe okwongera okunyiga, tuteekeko pressure, tuteeke eryanyi, twekalakaase ffenna gye tuli mu mawanga ag'enjawulo, twongere okuteeka ICC Kazito esobole okutwala omusango guno mu maaso, Gen. Museveni akwatibwe ne famire yaabo abatemu batambula nabo basobole okukaligibwa, eggwanga lyaffe lyetereere tulyeyagaliremu. Mbaagala nnyo mwenna abaliko, mwebale kubaako, Mukama Katonda gwe nsaba bankuumire. Tujja kuba tuddamu tugambe ebigambo, bw'anabakkiriza Ddunda Lugaba Namugereka, batayi mweraba.